Hello guys, and welcome back to another skill point guide video for Total War Warhammer 3 on Immortal Empires. Now today we'll be covering none other than the Chicken Man himself, Kairos Fateweaver. Now Kairos Fateweaver is a little bit of a different type of legendary lord in the fact that he's definitely a one-man doomstack, but he also receives benefits from actually having units in his army that make him stronger. Now, before we go into his skill tree, I'll explain why. Mainly, there's one skill point in here for sure, definitely that helps explain what I'm talking about there, where it's this Master of the Elemental Winds for Iridescent Horrors, Cultists, and Lords of Change. So those are your heroes, which the spell mastery, if you're unfamiliar with that, increases basically how strong your spells will be. Now every spell, damage dealing spell that is, does like 100% of their damage, but you can increase it with spell mastery. So Kairos having Greater Arcane Conduit will increase it by 10%. The more heroes you have will increase it by another 10%. Just making, Kairos himself that much more of a high-powered spell caster, which if you haven't played as Kairos, he's arguably one of the best, if not the best spellcasters in the game. But without further ado, let's jump into his actual skill guide and see how we are going to level him up. Definitely grab Root Marcher, just for some campaign movement range. We will come back to his blue line because he does have a lot of good abilities down his blue line that are really good, whether it's control all provinces or reducing the changing of the waves cooldown, which is his unique faction mechanic. But we'll get to that later on in the video. For Kairos, I recommend going down his magic line first, just because with him you will be doing the bulk of your spell casting with him. So fill out his magic line. Now, I don't really glean magic. I don't really like. I just don't really get that much use out of it. And since it starts off with 1 point into it for free, just leave it as it is and just worry about getting the rest of his spells down his spell tree. Same thing with the earthing. Assuming they fix it, it's okay for him to get it, in my opinion, just because if he does take damage from overcasting, he's got barrier, and the miscast damage you'll take from that won't get through his barrier, so it's okay to grab that with him. And then magical reserves and Greater Arcane Conduit. Now, as you're ranking up, once you hit rank 14, you will unlock these fragment abilities. Now, the fragment ability spells that you get aren't really that great in my opinion, but it's the passive abilities, that you want. So the ones that I recommend getting are the Fragment of Gur. That way you get a power recharge rate of plus 80% when he's casting. That lasts for 25 seconds. The Fragment of Shaiish. That way you get a reserves per second plus 10 when casting. Because he's able to reduce the overall cost of his spells so much, you'll get a better return of investment on your reserves in terms of a unlimited magic, which we'll talk about again later on, how you can increase that even further by having units in your army, because they'll be able to increase that even more. And the other two that I definitely like to get is the Fragment of Giron for Life Bloom, and then the Fragment of Olgu, I believe. That way you provide some more speed while he's flying around. Now, I don't really recommend, if I just click through these here, I don't actually recommend using any of the actual arcane items, because really the spells that you get out of these are just nowhere they just don't compare with Tzeentch's Firestorm, Infernal Gateway. They're just not that great. Now you can get the other one, the other passives. I just don't really like them personally, which is why I don't get them. But they're definitely not terrible passive abilities, mainly because your spells, the Tzeentch's Firestorm anyway does fire damage, so you could make the enemy weaker to those Firestorm casts with the Fragment of Akishi there, if I'm pronouncing that correctly. But once you get his magic line done and these passives done, definitely go down his special skill line. Really powerful skills here. Giving him 44% ward save for 22 seconds, plus 40% more barrier, which more barrier just means less damage that he's actually going to take on his actual health that the enemy just has to plow through. So more barrier, definitely a great thing. I do not get the Oracle. Anytime you see Winds of Magic when increasing or chance of winds increasing or when increasing, it's just not that big of a deal. It's just a wasted skill point, so I don't really recommend getting that one. However, the other three I do highly recommend getting. The barrier replenishment delay and rate is huge for himself as well as the rest of his army. Basically, once they get out of melee is when the barrier will basically start replenishing after a certain point of time. So being able to reduce that and also how quickly that barrier will replenish will just mean your units will be able to be in melee faster there. And then Wind Summoner is good just for some extra physical resistance for him, and also a Winds of Magic reserve +3 per turn. Now that is a static +3, so it's not like a when in increasing amount or a percentage amount. That's just you will get 3 Winds of Magic every turn, so go ahead and grab that. And then the Boons of Change, really good just to reduce the Winds of Magic cost for the siege spells in his army. And then getting the Bewitching Potency is really good because it gives you even more barrier, and also that attribute of the Mastery of the Elemental Winds that I mentioned earlier, which will increase the strength and power of the damage dealing spells in your campaign, for Kairos specifically. So yeah, in terms of like the big damaging like battle skills, those are the ones I recommend getting. Also, definitely grab the Gaze of Fate. Being able to completely halt an enemy in case it's a flying lord attacking Kairos and he needs to get away. Really good way to keep them away from Kairos while also reducing their melee attack if you have flying units of their own that can take the unit on. Also grabbing him more missile resistance. Even though he does have barrier, more missile resistance is never a bad thing, just to keep him even more protected from enemy missile fire. Now, even though I do recommend having like actual units in your army, because the Blue Horrors of Siege as well as the Big Horrors of Siege can get the Arcane Myrrh ability. If I can find it here we go, which gives a power recharge rate of 20% when out of melee. Now, since they are missile units, they shouldn't be in melee ever, so they're going to constantly be giving that extra 20% recharge rate, which once you combine those 20% recharge rates for if you have 10 units there, so that, you know, hypothetically if you had 10 blue horrors or pink horrors combined, so that's an extra 200% power recharge rate. Plus, when you have the 80% from the Fragment of Gur, plus his Greater Arcane Conduit, plus Life Leeching, you're going to be getting actually more Winds of Magic back than you'll actually be spending, which is why I think Kairos is one of the best, if not the best, spellcasters in the game, because of how powerful his unlimited Winds of Magic can be once he gets a few more levels into his skill tree. But since you're not going to rely on your other units to do a lot of the fighting and damage dealing, I really don't go down the red line like ever. I instead focus on his blue line, because he's got a lot of good stuff down here that makes him even more powerful for his faction overall. Now I end up getting the Control through Confusion just because it's a control +3 for all provinces, so he doesn't have to be in the local province for that to take effect. And then I also grabbed the Binding of the Wills just to reduce the changing of the waste cooldown -3 turns. So as you're progressing through the campaign, you'll be grabbing more grimoires in his campaign, which is what you use to spend on the changing of the waste things, abilities. Whether, whatever you want to do, it's just fun to mess with the enemy. Whether you want to halt their faction completely or force war between two allies, just basically reducing that cooldown just means you get to do more messing around of the enemy and the AI in general. And then I do put 1 point in the lightning strike just because you have to, just to unlock the rest of his blue line down here. And then to finish out his blue line, because I do like to grab the campaign movement range down here for Renowned and Feared, I usually end up grabbing the casualty replenishment rate, because Kairos overall Siege has one of the worst replenishment rates in the game. Excuse me, currently. And the other ones just aren't that big of a deal. Changing of the ways cost minus 100 for the reveal faction intentions. Out of all of the changing of the ways abilities that you can do, this one isn't as important in my opinion. And then the grimoires +3 per turn. Like again, you'll be getting enough grimoires through battles and buildings and looting, stacking settlements, that kind of thing, where you're not gonna, that +3 per turn is not gonna make that big of a difference. And unfortunately, the grimoires from all buildings +100% is only if he's in a local province, which you're not gonna have Kairos just sitting in a settlement producing more grimoires per turn. It's just not really worth it for that. So because of that, I typically grab just the reduced upkeep +3%. Not that it makes that big of a difference, but it's better than nothing. But it's mainly just to grab the Renowned and Feared ability there. Now after that, you still have 9 points to spend. So I recommend again grabbing 3 points into mentor, which we've talked about in previous videos. So I won't elaborate too much on that. And then you still have 6 skill points to spend. Which at this point I usually end up grabbing more of the passive abilities. Now the first few that I grabbed are just the ones that I kind of think excuse me, are like essential, and the other ones are just kind of extra. And so out of the other ones here, I usually grab the fragment of Heesh and also the fragment of Shaman, just for the extra armor piercing and base weapon damage and leadership for all your units on the battlefield there. But with that being said, that is how I recommend leveling up Kairos. Let me know again down in the comments how you guys choose to level him up, if you guys do things any differently. Again, I'm always interested to hear how you guys decide to go about that. But don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel if you're enjoying the content. And I will see you guys again on the next live stream or video I upload. And until then, have a good one, guys, and I will see you later. Bye.